think there's so much issue nowadays with you're applying for jobs and going to a black hole and you think you're a great fit. And the problem is you could be the perfect candidate, but you could be like this 578th applicant. And let's be honest, no company has time to go through 500 applicants, let alone like 100's a lot. What do you really want? You want to go, hey, look, I've got 100 applicants, and the top 20 are 70% match and above. I'm going to look at all of them, maybe have a quick screen with all of them, and that's it. And if you're below 70, hey, look, you might not get an interview request because, that's okay though to know that. It's okay. It's okay to be told you're not right for a job, but the problem is people aren't being told that, and they're just going like, oh my God.
Welcome back to the MedTech 101 podcast, and this is take 2 of like an episode which I've really wanted to release for a very long time, and for technical reasons we couldn't do it the first time, so we're here. But since that first episode and now, the guest today is based in Mexico, and I think since then there was the uprising that happened in Mexico that everyone saw on the news, and in between I also had some exams. So it's quite exciting to do this episode today. But the episode today is basically talking about something that we usually don't talk about on the podcast, because the podcast has been extensively focused on actual medical devices, that come to market. But today's episode is more like, touching on the softer side of the business, like, human resources. How do you get recruited in? So the guest today, like Chay Carter, like, is a specialist in MedTech recruitment and is based in Mexico, and they have this really cool newsletter that they release very often, and I read it all the time to know what's happening in the industry. And yeah, so without really delaying too much, welcome back on the podcast, Chay.
It's good to be back. Thanks, Rodney. Cheers.
Yeah, I mean, as we were just quickly talking before this, like you said you were safe in Mexico with everything that was happening.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to be in Mexico City, which was pretty immune to a lot of the problems. But yeah, I think there were some corners of the country which were a little tricky, but everything's blown over. Hopefully everything starts to get
Good,
better.
good. Nice, nice. I just needed to clear that one out of the air, so
Appreciate
everyone
it.
knows
Yeah.
that you're safe. And sometimes the news tends to over exaggerate, but I mean, like, talking about your background, Che, it's quite interesting because I know you did psychology, but and then you worked in investment banking, and then but now you're like a sort of like a specialist for medtech recruitment. And I think this episode is really good for any listener, like most of the listeners on this podcast, either students or people that are young, looking to get into medtech. So this is also going to be good for you. But before we even get into that, like, maybe we could just start with your background and like how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, you're right. I studied psychology in London. God, when was that? Early 2000s, and it was umming and ahhing when I graduated about whether or not to do a master's degree, continue my education. And a friend of mine suggested getting into recruitment at the time, which would have been, I think probably a temporary little stopgap to maybe fund further education, but it turned into an entire career. I was working in investment banking recruitment. It was very interesting, right? Working on really cutting edge trading technologies, fascinating. It pretty wasn't as fulfilling as some of the other industries I've worked in, but it was definitely a good place to learn. Very fast paced, kind of learning how the world works as well from a financial perspective. Did that for a few years. Ended up moving to the US in 2015. Worked in recruitment for the renewable energy and power sector, but some really cutting edge stuff as well in New York, right? It's not pretty traditionally known for its sort of power generation, but it is known for its sort of investment in the industry. So I focus a lot of time on the venture capital, private equity side of that industry, and had a good run there, and then moved to the West Coast probably like 6 years ago to California. And I was lucky enough to work in life sciences and kind of pick up from my psychology degree, where I started to learn about neurotechnology, like mental health treatments and so forth that weren't pharmaceutically based. I was able to pick up what was a hobby and an interest. And about 18 months ago, set up my own business.
Nice.
Carter Sciences, imaginatively named,
Yes.
started off as a headhunting practice, and it's, as you mentioned, we've got a newsletter now. I was learning so much about the industry every single day, and I had probably 50 tabs open on my laptop. And I was like, yeah, people were asking me stuff all the time about what's happening in the space. And I was trying to keep up to date with it all. So ended up connecting with a former colleague of mine who was building these AI automation tools, and we put all these articles together, got it out there, and we've grown it to about, you know, over 2,000 subscribers now in
Wow.
less than a year, just neurotech focused as well. And then from there, I was asked to do some interviews with medium.com and the Neurotech X content lab. And that's now going to expand into similar things that you're doing, Rodney, like
Yeah.
podcast stuff. And then we were also getting asked by people, like all these companies on these newsletters, like who are they? I've never heard of them. Like, are they hiring? So
Yeah.
then I started to put together a jobs letter, which was basically a list of all these companies' career pages and LinkedIn jobs. And I think what the problem was, and this is probably where we're going to get to, is that the LinkedIn job market was really tough and it's really difficult to stand out. So we were like, let's build something different. So we built a job board, which is essentially turning into like a market data job board platform thing just for neurotech with plans to expand outside of that. But yeah, the business has kind of turned into more of an ecosystem rather than just a headhunting practice over the last 18 months. And it's been quite the
True,
journey.
true, and that's very true. Like as I said, and like I always do this, I will put the link below. So if anyone is listening right now, I'll
Fantastic.
put the link below for the newsletter where you can sign up, and I'll also put the link below for Reccy Neuro, which is also like a platform. As Shay touched on a little bit earlier about like recruitment, and the nice thing I like about it is you upload your CV, and you essentially kind of matches you. It analyzes your CV, it gives you like a certain percentage as to how much you
Yeah.
match to a certain job, and I think it's quite nice. And like obviously right now I'm in business school, and I just finished the first semester, so I've got about a year left to go. But after my masters, I'm gonna be back in the markets, and it's one of the things that I'm sort of like keeping an eye on to see what new jobs come on and so forth. And but I have to give you some credit since I created my account like in January, and the last time I checked, I think it was a couple of days ago. There've been more companies that have gone on like up there, so like the database is growing. So
Yeah.
I'd recommend anyone to go and create an account there. It's free. I think it's important to say that as well. It's free, and yeah, you can sort of like see what jobs suits you the best. But then sort of like rewinding back,
Yeah.
because they said a lot of things. Uh, I mean, like, just out of curiosity, like your time in investment bank recruitment, was it as cutthroat as they make it seem to be? Like, or was it something that was more like you have to just tick a number of boxes and then you get the job in investment banking? Because I'm sure there's people listening right now who are also in engineering, and they're being
Yeah.
tempted to take that route to IB, and I think it happens like a lot to a lot of
Yeah.
engineers.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. Look, I think so for me it taught me a lot about like how technology and or systems are built, right?
Mhm.
I think it was obviously pure hardcore software. I remember some of the hedge fund teams were working with machine learning engineers at the time, and around like the mid 2000s, and that was fascinating because I think everyone probably thought that was a bit of a buzzword and no one really knew what it meant, AI and machine learning in the early 2000s. But I was lucky enough to work for a very, very successful business that was growing massively and got bought out in the end. I was lucky enough to be part of that. And the company was broken down and divided between different teams. So, like, I was working on front office, trading, technology, business analysts, and project managers. So it really, really focused on like the less technical stuff, but the guys who were making sure the stuff got built and understanding how and why it was getting built. And there were other teams who were focused on the software engineering side. I know now as a software engineer, there's like way more software companies out there than there were back then. And there is a temptation, right? I think, again, we'll probably get into this, but I think like software and hardware engineering are just like probably the two of the hottest topics right now, and certainly the most rapidly evolving in the space. So, hey, I would never say no to anyone that's looking at industries outside of it, but I will say if you get out of medical device, it's probably hard to get back in if you spent a few years working in finance.
True, true. Because I think also the industry is filled with sort of like developing regulations and stuff like that, and it's always something you'd want to stay on top of, right?
Yeah,
That's exciting, and so then sort of like moving into like MedTech and Neurotech, and I know you specifically mentioned Neurotech. And for guys listening, like MedTech is quite broad, and there's different types of MedTech. There's prosthetics, there is sort of like like AI as a software, like like for medical devices, and then there's also like neurotech in specifically. But I'm sure that some of the sort of like quote unquote like rules that gets you hired in neurotech can be translatable to other areas of medtech. So like I'm curious, to know like maybe like I know you did mention it a bit earlier about like what kata science is like specifically what it's about, like in summary, and how like you guys are basically expanding, to work on helping these companies in medtech. Like if the CEOs listening right now, what do they do? Do they just email you to get on the platform? There's a certain kind of verification they need to go through, etc. So yeah, sorry, I'm asking you so many questions at the same time, but
Yeah,
I'm just
no, all good.
listening.
I'll start with like the Carter scientist stuff was really bred out of like how exciting and evolving the neurotech industry is. Like you mentioned all these different sectors. Like yeah, there's orthopedics, there's like anything that there's like implantable devices. There is like capital sales devices too. There's imaging devices. Anything that you go to a hospital or a clinic and you can pick up, right, is a medical device essentially, right? But then you've also got the implantable space. And what I loved about neurotech was that it's quite broad. So you've got the old school implantable neuromodulation market, like spinal cord stimulators, deep brain stimulators, vagus nerve. Now there's peripheral nerve stimulators, and all sorts. And then there's also this wearable non-invasive market too, which is really fascinating. And I think a lot of that is focused nowadays on mental health, neurodegenerative, and even more direct to consumer wearable stuff. So like you see all these devices now popping up that are like wearable EEG devices. And I've wrote an article about this recently actually on my Substack, which we share that link as well. But there's like mental health tech, wearable EEG. There's the BCI market, which gets so much attention too. It's the Elon Musk vacuum of attention and fundraising. So like there's loads of exciting stuff happening there. But what I loved about neurotech was that even the old school technology is really fascinating, and it's still really cutting edge and considered to be kind of fringe to most people. If you talk about an implantable spinal cord stimulator, like that pretty freaks a lot of people out, but it's been around for decades. And then let alone what we're trying to do with brain computer interfaces, let alone the reemergence of EEG technology now, thanks to the machine learning evolution. We've got EEG technology, which is 100 years old, now being sort of modernized and adapted and enhanced with modern technology. And I think that's what's so interesting about the space, is that anything brain and nervous system related is a neurotech device. So really, really interesting there. And yeah, what we did with Reki was we realized that there was so much going on in the market. There's so much noise, right? You go on LinkedIn right now, which is everyone's probably predominant focus for finding a job, and you could type in neurotechnology and engineer, just keep it broad, right? And you'll probably go through 10 pages of engineering positions with neurotech companies, like on the fringes of it. But then you also get like a DoorDash engineer job, and you'll get maybe a Skype engineer job. And you're like, the system doesn't really work. It's just trying to pump out a lot of information. Plus, you've got loads of news on there, which is like suggested the algorithm means that some of the stuff that you want to actually see probably won't be there because maybe it hasn't got enough likes. And also as well, like applying for a job, there's an easy apply button on LinkedIn. It's a bloody nightmare. There's like hundreds of applicants. So we wanted to build a platform where, first of all, there's a stat I read recently that said 1 in 4 job applicants right now is a bot. And there are systems out there which charge $20 a month that'll rewrite your resume for you and apply for you for 100 jobs a day. I won't name any names, but like since I found the first one, my Instagram is just full of these ads now,
Yeah.
and it's crazy. It's kind of scary to think about it because it's like they think they're solving a problem by making sure that you're getting more applications out, but it's actually creating more of a problem because many people are using these systems because they're so
Just flooding the
disenfranchised with the
system.
market.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we were like, let's change that. Let's build like a LinkedIn for neurotech. And it's going to start off as just neurotech. And in the future, maybe we'll look at orthopedics, diagnostics, or even renewables and, trading technology and things like that. It's essentially my newsletter feeds into it. So all the latest news is up there. We're thinking about turning it into a feed too, like on LinkedIn, but only neurotech and only news focused feed. We have a job board on there too, which means that candidates get a scoring based on their profile to a job. So when a candidate creates a profile, they are attaching their LinkedIn, attaching their resume. They're also selecting industry segmentations that they really like. So for me, I always view it in 3 ways. There's like, what department are you in, or do you want to work in? Are you like a clinical guy? regulatory, commercial, research, and then the technology piece. Like, what are you? Are you a spinal cord stimulation person? Are you a BCI enthusiast? Are you an EEG technician? And then the final piece is like the indications, the medical side of it, right? We can't forget that people working in medical devices often have a deep passion for a specific area that they're focused on working in. And in neurotech is often things like movement disorders or speech or, like I said before, mental health, neurodegenerative. So you create this like three-dimensional profile of yourself. And then companies do the same thing. If you're a company, like what are you? Are you a medical device manufacturer? Are you a CDMO? Are you a consultancy? Are you a wearable consumer device? What technology are you working in, what are you trying to solve, and then you attach a job description, and that job description will essentially match with candidates.
True.
So we're creating this three-dimensional world. I think there's so much issue nowadays with you're applying for jobs and going to a black hole and you think you're a great fit. And the problem is you could be the perfect candidate, but you could be like this 578 applicants. And let's be honest, no company has time to go through 500 applicants, let alone like a hundred's a lot. What do you really want? You want to go, hey, look, I've got 100 applicants, and the top 20 are 70% match and above. I'm going to look at all of them, maybe have a quick screen with all of them, and that's it. And if you're below 70, hey, look, you might not get an interview request because, that's okay though to know that. It's okay. It's okay to be told you're not right for a job, but the problem is people aren't being told that and they're just going like, oh my God. Another stat I read recently was that like the average person has to apply for over 700 jobs to get a job at this point,
It's
which
something
is
like that.
terrifying.
It's something like that, and I totally agree with you. And I think the markets is fueled of that. I think it's gotten to a point now where people are going to drastic lengths, and I'm talking from a position where I think it's something that's on my mind as well, because like in a year's time I'm back on the job market, and it's something that I have to think about, to think, okay, cool, I took this time to just go do my master's degree, like in a business school, and I'm really happy that I did that, because now I even appreciate the other side of the of a business, like human resources, like that, which is basically what we're talking about today within MedTech. And yeah, it's you have to go through so many numbers, and you mentioned many devices there. Even on the podcast, we've been fortunate enough to have a few companies, like some episodes we did with Dr. Kevin Tracy, and the company doing like the vagus nerve stimulation to basically reduce inflammation and pain and so forth. And then also we did another episode, another company called Spinally out of Spain, and they've got a spinal implant which basically like sort of like reduces the amount of pain being transmitted to the brain, like for people dealing with chronic pain and so forth. So it's actually exciting stuff, and a lot of people that come here, sometimes they get surprised about how far the technology has gone. And it's important that the systems are being built to help like uptake of jobs in this kind of like sector. So me, I'm excited about it. I'm excited, and obviously, like, sorry to cut you short there, Che. You're talking, but I'm just excited with everything you're saying, because it makes sense, and it's all part of, I think, maybe some of the biggest problems you guys are dealing with at the moment in medtech right now, or what do you say is the biggest recruitment problem in medtech, besides companies failing to match like candidate number 500 with you know
Yeah.
and so forth, and or do you think sometimes it's even harder knowing the companies as well, because sometimes you got so many small companies that are also unknown, but they're looking to hire? So yeah, how does it work?
Yeah. Well, I'll use like neurotech as like a microcosm, right? And we can focus on it that way. And I think there's a few things. We often see these big valuations and big fundraisers happen at companies, and I think when we see that happen in, say, like a software company, like an AI, someone raises 10 million, what that usually means is that's like half of that is probably going to go, not maybe not half of it, but a large portion of that is going to go to hiring, growth, and so forth, and expanding the business and whatnot. And they can get some exceptional talent. So recruitment in those types of industries is different, right? It's like fast paced. It's a race for the best people. Different in medtech, different in neurotech, right? When 10 million is raised, that's probably going to maybe a couple of interns and maybe one or two strategic hires, and most of it is going to like prototype building, clinical trials, the regulatory process. I know companies who have spent millions on regulatory fees because it's complicated out there. And if you're doing something really cutting edge and you're first to market, you're going to get pushback. So like you're on a battle right now, and everyone will tell you this in neurotech and medtech and in specific that yeah, money doesn't go that far, and often yeah, it dilutes very quickly. So I think we've got to be honest about the industry. When you see these big raises happen, doesn't mean everyone's hiring, but also at the same time, there's so much cool stuff happening that when a job is posted, people are just flooding towards it. The bots obviously will jump towards anything that has the word engineer in it. That's one thing, or software focused. So that automatically dilutes that. So it's really difficult to make yourself stand out. The software side also too is just like it's a really popular space. There's a lot of people now and exiting PhD programs with like data science focuses, with specific neurotech or medtech specialisms, and it's tricky. There's a lot of people with really highly technical skills right now in the market. So how do you differentiate yourself is one thing. And then another thing is like there are still really difficult markets to hire in, and the electrical engineering market is super tight. It is really tough. There is just a lot of a real shortage of it, mainly because software engineers can work remotely. They can work anywhere in the world, and there's very rarely a need for like an on-site software engineering job because the best guys can work wherever they want. And don't get me wrong, there will be some on-site time, but yeah. Then the other piece is hardware engineers need to be on-site. So depending on where you are, that's why you see like lots of companies in neurotech in particular right now moving to the Bay Area. It's like San Francisco, Austin, and New York are really these like hubs, but there's a few in Minnesota too because like the Medtronic spillover startups. But really, it's tricky, right? It's a really difficult place to attract talent to. And the problem with the Austin, New York, and San Francisco hubs is that companies outside of medtech are also hiring for software and electrical engineers. So then like the race becomes like, who's got more money to pay these people? And then we go back to my first point. Like there isn't that much disposable income at these companies because the really exciting ones as well are sort of like preclinical or maybe like pre-regulatory at least, definitely pre-commercial. And my advice to everyone is always like, do not be like shy around like the major medtech players. Like the J&Js, the Strikers, the Medtronics, the Bostons, the Abbotts, like do not be shy around them. It's a great place to get to cut your teeth at when you first leave the workforce. Everyone wants to work at the coolest new startup, but the reality is startups want someone who's got a few years experience of shipping devices. Um, Versus like you might be like, okay, this is my way in, this is the best place for me to be. Like take a step back and think about like if you're an employer. I think a lot of the time candidates too think about like, oh, this is great, this is really cool, I want to work there. Okay, let's get there in a few years, but for now let's learn what an amazing company looks like to work for, and get a job at one of the bigger firms, stability, working on something that's hyper specialized, and then go from there. Some of the best and most experienced people I know in neurotech that have worked at multiple startups started their careers at Medtronic, for instance. And there's that's like I think the newer generation entering the workforce probably don't think about the workforce the same way as that maybe my generation did or older generations did. But I do think there's still a lot of value in those larger companies,
True.
and tons of really exciting innovation happening as well.
And I definitely agree with you. And it reminds me of my the first job I got after I finished university in Nottingham was a job in Blackpool, out of all places in the UK, working for J&J, with particularly
Yeah,
Pew Synthesis, doing bond cements and so forth. And I was there for about a year and a half, but I was living in Preston, so I'd commute every day. But I didn't want to live in Blackpool. But for people listening who've never lived in the UK, like Blackpool is quite famous for like just like nights out. It's like the British
the beach
seaside.
town. Yeah,
Exactly. So in the north, so most people in the north go there for the lights during Christmas and everything. And I think there's more hotels in Blackpool, or hotel beds in Blackpool, than some parts of Portugal or something like that. And I remember the stats, and it was quite funny. And but getting back to the main point, is that in these companies you do learn systems, you do learn all this exciting stuff, and sometimes it feels like you're jumping in the deep end pool. And the companies with huge budgets, so in terms of what you actually go and look into and what you research, just working as a research and development engineer. So like you're not really like in short demand of of budgets, but sometimes they move slowly, so sometimes that's why they have to then acquire smaller companies,
yeah,
and smaller companies that are so keen to sell to what they call the big strategics, like the J&J, the Medtronic, etc., because they are it's like the exit path for most companies in medtech. Like this, the founders of those companies, since the day they started, they've been worrying about money. And I think obviously when you get bought out, you don't have to worry about that anymore because at least you're joining a bigger pool. But yeah, that's really exciting. But like obviously just to also pick your brain about like what do you think the future of recruitment is going to be going? I know you mentioned the AI bots doing 100 applications for you per day. You mentioned that money is a bit of an issue. So like for companies that are small, because and unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunate, but in medtech, most of the research, most of the exciting stuff it's usually coming from the smaller companies because they can move fast, they can make decisions quickly and so forth before they get acquired, of course. But those guys obviously are kind of tight for money, and obviously they have to attract the talents. They have to do this. So I don't know like what are your thoughts in terms of what you've seen on the market, the potential of AI, the potential of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me.
Well, I think first of all,
Mm,
there's obviously going to be a change in like the workforce, right?
yeah.
I think what's unique about medtech and what will never change is that because it's like it's focused on individual health and medical conditions and devices and so forth, that there's always going to have to be a human element. This isn't
Hmm.
going to be like a production line like you have in a car factory, for instance, building medical devices. We pretty will at some point, but
Hmm.
it'll be it still needs to be highly regulated, and the quality management side of it is really important because of that. Certainly in the implantable space, right? Really, 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 really important. But I think recruitment from an AI perspective is going to change. And I think my vision for Recce and where it's going to go is that um, people want, like when LinkedIn was first launched, it was like a really, really small community. Like I remember using it in 2007 at my first job in recruitment, and thinking like, oh, this is amazing. You can connect with people. You can understand you can see people's resumes basically from what they've added. I mean, back then there were no limits on who you could look at and who you could message. So it was a bit of a free for all. But the problem is that, it was actually launched, I think, and created before Facebook. So it was like, there wasn't like a model for a social media platform. It was like it's a professional networking site was essentially what it was dubbed at. And then it grew to this really big thing, and it started to realize that recruiters were using it a lot, and it just grew and grew and grew, and it had to monetize it, and the best people to target were recruiters because it was just such a big network. The reality is that in 2016 it was acquired by Microsoft for something like 20 billion or something, and that's obviously when it's now being utilized for data for Microsoft, workforce and analytics and so forth, but also at the same time looking at how they can get return on investment too. So everything's getting more expensive. The service isn't getting better. It prides itself in high volume, and it's lost this like ecosystem feel. It's lost this like professional networking feel, and now it's just like a dump of information that's hard to keep track of a lot of the time. And this is coming from someone who uses LinkedIn a lot. So you know, I feel like I'm validated in my opinion. So I think what the future lies in recruitment is more specialized ecosystems. And I mentioned Reki Neuro, just one example. I'm sure there'll be other things in the future. But for me, it's about like creating a mini LinkedIn which doesn't have the noise. People can actually feel like they're learning something from it. Non neurotech people can use it if they're interested in the market to learn about it. But it's about maybe having one or two different platforms that you use as opposed to one loud, messy, noisy one. There's a reason why so many people have like left Facebook over the years, right? As it kind
Yeah.
of just turned into a bit of a noisy mess and sort of like drunk uncle vibes. I think now it's like, LinkedIn is kind of getting to that of like, oh, it's like a drunk Christmas party, office party sort of thing. Of
Yeah.
like, oh God, people bragging about stuff, and then like
Yeah.
you can't find the people that you want to speak to, or like things are like blocked off, and it's tricky. And I think my vision for recruitment in the future is it's like a specialized hub where people can just go to and go, what's the news? Who are the companies? Who's hiring? What's interesting? Who do I like how do I learn something? Who are the investors in these companies? And the investors can come in and go, who are the cool new startups? Like what's a centralized hub? And less monetized around normal people trying to find jobs, and more monetized around companies going, hey, we want to hire, but we don't really want to spend recruitment fees, but we do want to access this super niche, specialized market of people. Um, so yeah, I think like that. There's loads of these AI automation tools for recruitment at the moment, right? Like every recruiter I know is just getting bombarded with messages going like, increase your outreach, do this, do that, like automate your CRM. And I'm like, that's great. But I think the reality is too many AI tools in recruitment are trying to solve recruiters' problems, and we're trying to solve a recruitment problem. And like maybe it's going to hinder me as a headhunter, but I think the reality is like the problem with recruitment isn't like whether or not recruiters are more automated. It's the actual application and general networking opportunity that existed and has changed so much that it doesn't really exist anymore.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think it's exciting to hear all of that, but yeah, I promise to not make this long. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Chay. And I think it's really educational for people that listened in terms of like how they can get a job, because I think most people actually want answers like that in terms of how do I actually get into this industry. And I think some of the questions were answered today. So location is important. Create an account on Reki Neuro. I was calling it Reccy Neuro all this time, but it's actually Reki Neuro. But
All good.
yeah, so yeah, thank you very much. And just before you go, like if people want to reach out to you, if companies want to list their products or their companies, or if they want to list their sort of like their products in the newsletter, if they want to list their job openings on Reki Neuro, how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, you can reach out to me at cartersciences.com. I've got a contact me, book an appointment list on there, or Chay at cartersciences.com. LinkedIn's always great too, despite what I said. It's a great networking tool. Just noisy. I am on there a lot, pretty more than most. But yeah, whatever suits you. Reki's growing. Feel free to sign up for it. It's all free. If you're a company and you're interested, I'm just checking it out without posting a job, feel free to drop me a message as well, and we'll get you set up on that as well. So it's open to everyone right now, and we want to make sure the community and the network grows so that we can expand it to other corners of the medtech and also commercial world as well.
Nice, nice. And yeah, thank you very much, Jay.
Thank you, man. Good to see you again, Rodney.
Cheers, take care.
Cheers.